Well, folks, thanks for tuning in again as we get ready for the weekend and giving you the news that matters, but behind the scenes so you don't have to do a lot of hours of doom scrolling to get to the main events of the day. And so looking quickly at the ongoing discussion on what's being called the Board of Peace that President Trump has put together. Interesting that a direct letter has gone out to Canada saying not welcome on the Board of Peace. One headliner spelt the word B-O-R-E-D, Board of Peace, and not Board of Peace. And this is not really a good thing, not really a good look for Canada, as Canada's foreign policy recently has really been hyperventilated towards getting really cozy with China. And that's causing concern, obviously, on the U.S. side. Well, there's also speculation that with this Board of Peace, what President Trump is doing is sidestepping or bypassing the United Nations. Now, a lot of people, and I'll say including myself, think that's probably not a bad idea. The United Nations record over the last few decades has not been particularly envious. A ton of billions and billions of money being spent, and UN committees usually being headed up by a majority of countries that are, if not outwardly and distinctly left-leaning, then Muslim-controlled. But in this case, the Board of Peace, the number of countries that is joining is significant, and a number of those are Muslim countries. So having Muslim countries involved in bringing peace to Gaza is probably positive. It may work out, and it should put pressure on the UN, whose funding, as we know now, it's been totally exposed, billions and billions of dollars that could have been and should have been going to infrastructure into Gaza went into building those tunnels. And we see that the United Nations Work Relief Agency, known as UNRWA, is starting up the school programs again in Gaza, school programs which teach children the main goal of Hamas is to kill Jews everywhere and to vaporize Israel. So might not be a bad thing overall that Trump is signaling there may be other ways to settle massive disputes than always trying to run it through the UN. Well, in Canada, one of the major newspapers there, the Globe and Mail, is talking about interviews with the Canadian military, and under Prime Minister Carney, this continual pushback against the U.S., and saying that Canadian soldiers are going to be preparing for, or at least sending a signal for, a possible invasion from Canada. Seriously? Some politicians, it seems, will go to any length to try and get scare tactics on votes. Folks, I can tell you, having been a Minister of Public Safety and having been in charge of our having oversight with some of the workings that go on in Afghanistan at the time, and with the U.S. The U.S. will not be invading Canada anytime soon. I was in the U.S. in meetings just last week, and I was telling people in the U.S. that, they tried back in 1812 to came up to Canada, burned down some buildings in Toronto, and Canadian forces turned it around, went back down to Washington and burned down the White House, and the Americans haven't tried anything since. So this stuff is really getting, as they say, to hyperbolic levels. And to have the senior Canadian Army officials say they'll be training Canadian soldiers in Taliban-like tactics. Taliban who beheads people, who tortures, who murders, who kill women, who do the most offensive and disgusting things possible, and even suggesting and tying the word Taliban to Canadian forces, I think should be a matter of disciplinary effect on those Canadian generals, if this is true that they even said this. By the way, I was in Afghanistan twice, went over there with our forces to see how they were doing. They were arm in arm and linked with U.S. forces. Canadian forces suffered 158 casualties in terms of people being killed. They worked very well with them. So really, let's change some of this rhetoric. It's just getting ridiculous. And let's keep in mind who the enemy is. It's not America, it's not China. We need to be looking at countries like Iran And China, sorry, it's not America, it's not Canada, let me correct that. It's countries like China and Iran that we need to be careful about. So we're going to see some of the temperature turning down on that. American media is also, it's talking about Canada with this big push to get cozier with China. And they're doing it, most of the headlines that I'm seeing on the US side showing some sympathy towards Canada in terms of some of the statements that President Trump makes about Canada becoming the 51st state and things like that. So showing some sympathy, but media in the US, whether it's on the left or the right, generally saying the same thing. Sympathy for Canada, but dumb to be cozying up to China. Not really a smart move. As we've said before, around the world, business people should be, and entrepreneurs should be able to trade freely one with another across borders, and you should be able to do that without having to say you're endorsing the policies of a certain country or a federal government anywhere. But let's try and work on the rhetoric here. Well, the US has said they are going to allow NVIDIA to be sending chips to China after all. China, as a matter of fact, has now, just in the last couple days, signaled to some of their biggest companies like Alibaba and Tencent that to prepare to be able to import, of course, millions of these chips from NVIDIA. So a couple of things where that's going to have a measurable effect. First of all, watch for NVIDIA stock. If you are still hanging on to it when you bought it for a few cents, you're going to become even wealthier because, of course, NVIDIA stock will go up as their chips are being purchased more broadly and more aggressively in China. And then watch for China on the tech side to be able to accelerate the gains that they would be hoping to make against U.S. technology. Of course, U.S. tech constantly leading the field on this type of technology and AI and other areas. But now it's going to be interesting to see if China is going to be able to speed up and accelerate when they get these NVIDIA chips. It's being argued that these particular chips are not the highest grade. We'll have to see what happens. China, of course, is notorious for being able to upgrade anything they steal from other countries. So let's keep an eye on that. Well, something that has never happened in terms of space history, if you've been watching, there's been some, of course, reporting on this, but the first ever space evacuation for health reasons, the first ever medevac, you can call that, as we've seen the 4 astronauts evacuated from the space station that's circling around outer space up there above us. Really a remarkable evacuation. Authorities aren't being super clear on what is the medical problem. They're asking for some confidentiality on that. But the fact is, again, it's NASA calling on SpaceX to perform a stunning, really first time evacuation, medical vac in history. And again, because most or a lot of media in the US is culturally Marxist and leaning to the left, very little is being talked about the fact that, yes, this is Elon Musk's company. Elon Musk is CEO, controlling manager, and also chief engineer of SpaceX. That's the organization that once again saved the day up there in outer space. And very little coverage or remarks about that, about being Musk. Is it possible that much of US media also, we've heard of Trump derangement syndrome, in which the hatred for Trump is so much that it's being argued or suggested that media, especially center-left media, cultural Marxist media, that if Trump was to discover the cure for cancer, that a journalist wouldn't take it because it was him who discovered it. It seems to be they've got the same aversion to talking about Elon Musk being head of SpaceX. Whatever the reason, it was a remarkable recovery. And keep in mind, the Artemis mission back to the moon, that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So some pretty amazing stuff happening there, as much media seems to be spaced out in terms of how they're reporting on it. Well, the controversy over the US, the H-1B visa, and this is affecting a lot of people in the tech world, and where it's really affecting is some of the top people in tech who have been in Silicon Valley and have been in the US in various places, and they've been here on the H-1B visa program, now getting pressure and may have to return to their home countries. And many, if not most of those top tech people are from India. And so they're already seeing out of Silicon Valley and out of the US, some of the top high tech, especially related to AI, technicians going back to India. The result of that will mean a shift in terms of some of the tech breakthroughs and some of the AI advancements going back to India. This will have some effect on the US, losing some of the best tech people in the world. So keep an eye on that. But you look at the combined effect of that, top tech people moving back to India, look at China possibly moving ahead in terms of their own development because of the NVIDIA chips. And again, some interesting forces coming to play on the US economy. Will the US economy still be able to move ahead? And remember, that's going to be, if I can use the word, the chip that Democrats are going to be playing relative to the midterms coming up. If they can make it look like the economy is down, and we know that voters will always vote poorly or not in a big way for the government in power, be it Democrat or Republican, if the economy is not doing well. So keep an eye on that. And following an interesting story, maybe you've seen it, that the Clintons had said no to being subpoenaed relative to the Epstein charges and the Epstein files. They've said no. They're not going to be. And of course, this is considered an act of contempt, a contempt of Congress. And the question the last few days is, will Congress vote, in fact, to subpoena them, which is a very, like to indict them, which is a very heavy circumstance. And some people seem surprised that Democrats joined Republicans in saying, yes, we are going to subpoena the Clintons to appear and to testify relative to Epstein. So people were saying, well, does that mean there's more support now coming for Trump from the Democrats? Actually not. What the Democrats are realizing is if they stop the subpoena for the Clintons, they will have very little moral ground, the Democratic Party would, to stop subpoenas or to bring a subpoena against Trump in the future. So what they've done is the Democrats have thrown the Clintons under the bus because they have future target plans relative to Trump, and that's why they have done this. Well, a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety being caused by all of these world events every day. And so what made it even more interesting is an interview, if you just saw it, with LeBron James from the LA Lakers. And he had recently posted, and some people were surprised, a Bible verse on his platform. That's a platform that is read daily by about 175 million people. And he posted a scripture. The scripture is actually Isaiah, from the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament of the Bible, verses 41:10, and it says, "Do not fear, I am with you." The amazing thing about, so they interviewed him, catch this interview, go online, you can see it. And they asked LeBron James about that, and he said, well, that verse was handed to him by one of the ball boys who work in the, for every team and on the NBA. And these are the guys, you see them in the background, they're running around and they grab the basketballs and they keep them clean and they keep handing the basketballs to the players. So sort of seen as kind of the lower echelon for sure in professional basketball. But LeBron James commented and said, yeah, this kid handed him that verse and told him Jesus loved him. And he went home and read the verse and thought, that verse calmed him down, saying, do not fear, I am with you. So as LeBron James said, he decided to post it. Well, maybe some good advice there from LeBron James. Folks, take that advice. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you tomorrow for the weekend roundup. Thanks for tuning in.